I turn the seller into the bank. And that is the basic essence of seller financing. You have to qualify the person who is buying it. They have the ability to qualify people and underwrite whether that person is going to actually be able to make payments on it. But now I'm able to cash flow really well as a rental, right? So you can create really cool solutions as a buyer. So today, we're talking about seller financing. Okay, who knows what seller financing is? There's a down payment, there are monthly payments, but how it works, like with a normal house, you give an offer of $1 million, right? Or let's just do 100,000. I think that'll be easier. What happens is you get pre-qualified with a bank, you put in a down payment to the house, and then you make monthly payments to the bank. And then the bank is making interest and you're making monthly payments to them, and then the bank pays the seller. What seller financing is I turn the seller into the bank. So instead of me making payments to Chase over a bunch of years, I give the down payment to the seller, I give the monthly payments to the seller, I give the profits to the seller. And that is the basic essence of seller financing, is you're turning the seller into Bank of America. So what are the pros of seller financing? It's the most amount of money possible, always. You can probably get a higher price than if it's just a cash deal or through a bank, because they probably can't qualify. You can charge way higher interest than a normal bank can do, because they probably can't qualify the type of person you're selling to. And then also, and we'll do the seller, you basically get the most amount of money possible. You get an insane amount of money, and that's the main pro, is you get the most amount of money. The cons, so there are a few cons with it. The con for that is you have to wait. You don't get all of your money at once. You're gonna have to wait a while for your money. Another one is potential foreclosure versus evicting, and foreclosing is harder than evicting. It takes longer usually. You just have to know what you're doing, and you're gonna have to foreclose on it just like a lender. And also, it's a little bit more legal paperwork. You have to qualify the person who is buying it. Now, the easiest way to do this is through what I call an RMLLO. This is short for a residential mortgage loan officer. They don't necessarily work for a bank. They have a certain qualification. They're a mortgage loan officer. They have the ability to qualify people and underwrite whether that person is going to actually be able to make payments on it. Otherwise, it can be considered predatory lending. If you seller finance and you didn't do any due diligence whatsoever on if this person can make payments, this was a huge thing in 2008. So there were a lot of laws put on lenders. If you're selling as a seller financing, you're turning yourself into a lender. There were a lot of laws put on lenders to make sure that there isn't predatory lending. You're not just qualifying whoever, giving loans willy-nilly, hoping they foreclose, and then taking the house back and screwing that person who never had an opportunity or wasn't set up for success in buying that house. There are plenty of these, but it just costs some money to get them to qualify. I don't think it's usually that much. Yeah, they're like under $1,000 to get this done. It's something you want to do if you're thinking about selling on seller financing, though. They probably don't. You wanna make sure it's underwritten by someone who normally qualifies other human beings. An investor, a lot of times investors, it's not as big of a deal, but in terms of someone who is like an end buyer, this is a really key step to make sure you're legally covered. But you're running a risk of being sued, right? Of the seller being like, hey, you didn't pre-qualify me. I think this was predatory lending. And then there's potentially a lawsuit there. Pros for the buyers. The basic ones, easy. You don't need to qualify as much. You don't need nearly as many qualifications. Banks are super strict. And RMLO, what they're doing is they're just making sure they can make the payment. A bank is going above and beyond, making sure that it's beyond just their ability to make payments. It's also, there are seasoning requirements, like how long have you had the money for in your bank account? How much of your net worth is this? What other debts do you have that could be affecting this? The banks go through a way more rigorous process. So for a buyer, it's nice to do seller financing because the process is much calmer. It's way easier to get past an RMLO than it is to get past a bank, right? Because banks are really, really not nearly as risk tolerant as investors are, right? So that's a huge pro. I would say this is the main pro, is that you don't need to qualify. There's also pros as the buyer for us as investors buying on seller financing. You can get really, really good deals on seller financing, right? You can sometimes buy deals at 1, 2, 0, 3, 4%. I've heard of all sorts of interest rates raging because you can offer other things. Like, for instance, one of my favorite deals I ever did, this was with an investor. I wholesaled this deal. So I wholesaled this deal. It was 2% interest for 30 years, amortized, and I wholesaled this deal to another investor, right? It was amazing. Why I was able to get such a low interest rate was the seller wanted a certain purchase price in their head, right? The house probably was worth $650 if I remember this was a long time ago, and I sold it for $700. So you can get really good deals. It's like, okay, I sacrificed equity, but now I'm able to cash flow really well as a rental, right? So you can create really cool solutions as a buyer. But like, you could get incredibly low down payments. You could be putting down like 2 or 3% for a house. You could be buying it, like the price might be higher, but your payments and your down payment are gonna be lower. So you're gonna be able to way more easily turn it into a rental or whatever exit strategy you want. So it's an amazing way to do it as a buyer, right? Generally, in my experience with seller financing, the deals that I get that are on seller financing, the seller is greedy, generally, right? They want the absolute most amount of money as possible, which is great, right? A lot of times there'll be sellers who have, like their house is worth 650 grand and they're like, no, I want 800 grand. My grandma told me it's worth 800 grand. I want it for 800 grand. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. Here's how we do it. We have to turn you into the lender, and I'm gonna make payments to you every single month, and you're gonna make the profits of the bank, right? So it's an awesome way for buying houses, right? I absolutely love it. The cons as a buyer, there aren't many as the buyer. The only thing I would say as a con as a buyer, if you're buying it and you're a homeowner and the reason why you're only able to do this on seller financing is because you can't qualify, this might be flipped and you might get bad terms. You might get higher interest rates, higher down payment, higher price, right? So the con for buying it is if you're buying it as a residential homeowner and you're buying it from an investor, you're probably not getting as good of terms as you could get from a bank, right? If you're buying it from a homeowner and you're thinking of it as an investor and you're able to negotiate good terms, there aren't really that many cons as the buyer. Like the only con would possibly be is like you don't make the payments, but there really aren't that many cons as the buyer if you are able to negotiate really good terms. The only thing I'll say is like potentially worse terms than a bank if you're bad at negotiating. Otherwise, it's amazing as a buyer. I don't know why you wouldn't do it as a buyer, right?
How do capital gains set on the seller's side?
So let's say we do this, I buy a house from you on seller financing. You want 10% and you want $2,000 a month. The capital gains you would pay would be based on just the down payment for that year and the monthly payments, right? Like it depends on your entire portfolio, right? Which tax rate you're gonna get. As a seller, there are way more tax benefits. So instead of getting $400,000 all at once, which is gonna be taxed at a way higher capital gains bracket because you just got a chunk of money all at once, this is gonna lower your overall tax burden because you're receiving your money over 30 years. So the government's only gonna charge you the capital gains on whatever you actually received that year.